Привет, I'm Chuck Olenek, a Ukrainian-American. I was baptized with the name Yaroslav, and I use that name for my persona in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism, or I'm known as Yaroslav the Persistent, or more familiarly as Yari. What I've been doing is I've been putting together videos on Slavic mythology, folklore, and history in order to raise awareness of the area, in order to help people develop a persona if they choose to go with an Eastern European persona. And quite frankly, it also refamiliarizes me with the territory. It's good to review. So I'm getting into a sort of a two-part video, maybe a three-part video on the Mongol invasions, except that this is the early stuff, where the Mongols are just kind of cruising through and going, oh, these people can't defend themselves, cool. So, the historical version of the Battle of the Kalka River. Next video will be what ended up in the Chronicles in Novgorod. Okay. So, the Battle of the Kalka River. That was fought between the Mongol Empire, whose armies were led by Jebenoyan and Subutai, the ones involved in this part of the story, and a coalition of Rus principalities, including Kyiv and Galicia, Volhynia, and the Kumans, or Kipchaks, or Ulovtsians, under Koitin. They were under the joint command of Mstislav the Bold and Mstislav the Third of Kiev. By the way, there's a whole bunch of Mstislavs that are mentioned in this. The battle was fought on May 31st, 1223, on the banks of the Kalka River in present-day Donetsk Oblast, Ukraine, which is where a lot of fighting is going on during the current war, and which Russia is now trying to claim. And it ended in a decisive Mongol victory. Here's the background. Jebenoyan, one of Chinggis Khan's generals, everyone else likes to say Genghis Khan because it's easier, asked the Khan for a year or two to continue his conquests before returning to Mongolia by way of the Caucasus. While awaiting Chinggis's reply, Jebi and Subutai, another general, led their army of 20,000 men and left behind a trail of destruction as they moved through Persian Iraq and Azerbaijan, sacking the cities of Rey, Zanjan, and Kazvin. The city of Hamadan surrendered without a struggle. They just flat out gave up. Meanwhile, Ozbek, he's the Atabeg of Azerbaijan, he saved his capital Tabriz and prevented his country's destruction by giving the Mongols a large amount of money, a lot of clothing, a lot of horses, which were amongst the Mongols' best weapons. After this, the two Mongol generals had successfully made their way through the Caucasus, attacking the Kingdom of Georgia and mortally wounding the Georgian King George by the time the Khan had given permission for Jebi and Noyan and Subutai to continue doing exactly what they already were doing. So these Mongol generals, after inflicting all this harm in the Caucasus, they're trying to get their troops through the Caucasus, and they're going to lose hundreds of men to the cold. Eventually, they're going to have to abandon their siege engines. Like, it was too much to carry them through. And when they got north of the Caucasus, they ran into an alliance that was made up of Lesgians, Alans, Cherkesses, basically tribes that were north of the area. And that army was like about 50,000 men. This alliance was joined by the Kumans, Turkic people. They had a khanate that stretched from Lake Balkhash to the Black Sea. And they also managed to convince the Khazars and the Volga Bulgars to join in. Let's have a big party. The Kuman Khan, Kyivan, placed his army under the command of his brother Yuri and his son Daniel. The first battle between the League and the Mongols was indecisive, but the Mongols managed to persuade the Kumans to abandon the alliance, reminding them of Turkic-Mongol friendship, and they promised them a share of the booty gained from the Caucasian tribes. So there's this arrangement for a betrayal. And once that's settled, the Mongols attack the alliance army, rout the army, and the Kumans are on their way home, and they've split themselves into two groups. They've got their booty with them, yay. And then the Mongols decide they're going to attack the Kumans too. And they destroyed both of those groups, both of those armies that were on their way home, and they executed every one of the prisoners before sacking Astrakhan. The Mongols began pursuing the Kumans, what was left of them, as they fled in a northwesterly direction. But the Kuman Khan, Kyivan, he gets away. He flees to the court of his son-in-law, Mstislav Mstislavich of Galicia. And he warns Mstislav, today the Mongols have taken our land. Tomorrow they will take yours. However, the Kumans were ignored for about a year, as the Rus had suffered from Kuman raids for decades, and they're not all that eager to trust. But when news at last reached Kyiv that the Mongols were marching along the Dniester River, the Rus responded. Mstislav gathers an alliance of Kyivan Rus princes, including Mstislav III of Kyiv. Remember, there's going to be a bunch of Mstislavs involved in this. And Prince Yuri II of Vladimir Suzdal, who had also promised support. And the Rus princes then began mustering their armies and moving towards a rendezvous point. The number of men that were actually at the Battle of the River Kalka is disputed. Russian primary sources, they're pretty formulaic. The Novgorod First Chronicle and the Primary Chronicle imply a total of 11,000 soldiers for the Rus forces, and there were the Kuman cavalry, Kyivan's boys. Some estimates were about 5,000 for them. Some sources even say the Mongols had superior numbers. So the numbers for the Rus army, they could go anywhere from 30,000 to 80,000, while the Mongol estimates were 20 to 23,000. Doesn't really matter how big the army was. The move by the Rus army was detected by the Mongols. The Mongols are on the east side of the Dnipro River. So Jebi Nayan, he learns of the Rus. They're attempting to trap the Mongols. And what he does is he sends 10 envoys to the Prince of Kyiv. And the envoys are stating the Mongols have no problem with the Rus. They're only attacking the Kumans. They added that the Mongols were marching away, east from the Rus cities. And Mstislav of Kyiv has the envoys executed. And the Mongols responded by sending another set of ambassadors who declared war. When Jebi and Subutai heard of the Rus movements, they began moving east away from the Rus, leaving a rear guard of 1,000 men under the command of an officer, Hamabak, to report on the movements of the Rus and to act as bait. Soon, Mstislav the Bold reached the river opposite the rear guard, and it became apparent that no one prince had been appointed commander-in-chief. So, guess what? That means the princes all acted as they pleased. Eventually, Mstislav crossed the river under heavy arrow fire, When the Rus landed, however, their numbers were too great, and the Mongols were killed to the last man. After drawing out the Rus armies for 9 days in a feigned retreat, which spread out the Rus armies and made them vulnerable, the Mongols turned to face their pursuers along the Kalka River. The river's location is currently unknown, but it's thought to have been the Kalchik, which flows into the Sea of Azov. What the Mongols did is they stopped and they assumed battle formation on the banks of the Kalka. And Mstislav the Bold and his Kuman allies attacked the Mongols without waiting for the rest of the Rus army. And because of this, they were defeated. The Rus forces bringing up the rear had not yet arrived on the battlefield by the time the front ranks were dissolving. The army of Chernihiv, which was not aware that the battle had started, was advancing, and they ended up colliding head-on with the Kumans, who were retreating as fast as they could. Using smoke bombs to disrupt the coalition's ability to coordinate, which didn't look like they were doing a lot of that anyway, the Mongol cavalry took advantage of the confusion in the Chernihiv line and attacked, causing the line to collapse. This, in turn, led to the death of another Mstislav, Prince Mstislav of Chernihiv. The surrounded Rus were hit by volley after volley, and there were cavalry charges that attacked any weakness in the formation. As the Mongols were carrying out this annihilation, some of the army, led by Mstislav the Bold, managed to cut their way through the Mongol ring and escape. Mstislav of Kiev, however, arrived to see what remained of the Rus army fleeing. With his contingent of 10,000 men, he retreated to his stockaded camp on a hill by the Dnipro. The pursuing Mongol army caught up with Mstislav of Kiev's forces and started to besiege the camp. After holding out for 3 days, Mstislav of Kiev surrendered in return for a promise of safe conduct for himself and his men. Once they surrendered, however, the Mongols slaughtered them and executed Mstislav of Kiev and the Kyivan nobles with the traditional Mongol caveat reserved for royalty and nobility, without shedding blood. Mstislav and his nobles were buried and suffocated under the Mongol general's victory platform at the Victory Feast. Meanwhile, Mstislav the Bold managed to reach the western side of the Dnipro with what remained of his army. To stop the Mongols from crossing to the western side of the Dnipro, he destroyed all the boats that he could find. After the battle, the people of Rus trembled in fear at this unknown scourge that had emerged from the frontier and had destroyed the very flower of their army. However, the Mongols weren't there to conquer, not this time. They were merely marching east after plundering. The battle was a very costly one for the Rus princes. Only Mstislav the Bold was able to save some of his army. And out of the Rus primary sources, the primary chronicle gives a number of 10,000 killed, while much later there's a less reliable Nikonian chronicle that cites 60,000 killed. Again, think of the time period. The numbers are all over the map. The Novgorodian First Chronicle, that was the most reliable, contemporary to the battle, gives no figures at all, but it does say that only 1 in 10 soldiers made it back home, suggesting the number killed was equivalent to almost the entire army. Out of the Rus princes, the wounded Daniel of Volhynia and Mstislav the Bold managed to escape. The battle was a significant defeat, given that many of the Rus principalities lost much of their armies, with the notable exception of Vladimir Suzdal. So, following this victory, the Mongol armies head east, and Genghis Khan heaps great appreciation upon his general's achievements and great praise upon Jebinayan and Subutai. Jebi, however, is not going to survive the campaign long. He's going to die soon afterwards. But Subutai would return in 1237 to finish the job and conquer Kyivan Rus. Okay. That's going to be a video for a later time, a story for a later time. What I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to basically relate what was written in the chronicles about this event. So until the next time, do побачення.